Back here.
Military leaders think media needs some basic training.
They understand that no young sergeant will take the same precaution when he sees a TV crew taking pictures of him because he'll feel absolutely silly.
Military experience is also a political issue. The 1992 presidential campaign pitted World War II Navy flyer George Bush against Bill Clinton, who averted the Vietnam draft.
I've expressed my heartfelt difference with Governor Clinton on organizing demonstrations while in a foreign land against your country when young ghetto kids have been drafted and are dying.
I was opposed to the war. I couldn't help that. I felt very strongly about it, and I didn't want to go at the time.
Clinton is the first commander-in-chief since World War II not to have served in the military. In time, that could be less an issue, maybe next year, if the Republican candidate is a Phil Gramm who also had Vietnam-era draft deferments. Maybe not if it's Bob Dole, severely wounded in World War II. 1992 Democratic candidate Bob Kerrey suggests sometimes being a Vietnam vet can even be a negative.
The first time I had a press conference when I'm nervous as heck, and question number one was, do you have flashbacks?
Senator Kerry says he does not have flashbacks, but the war in Vietnam has left a legacy for all of us, the military, the media, the politicians, and society. Bernie?
Charles, going back to the schools you visited, how should the Vietnam War be taught? What do these students need to know?
I think, Bernie, we almost need to look more at the psychology of this war than we do of the history. The history will probably be relegated to a few pages in most school books, but it's the psychology of defeat that lingers over this country. We've talked to veterans who have still been unable to break away from the concerns, the agony, the anguish, the things they saw, who still lived 20 years ago. We know that there are families that cannot talk about this, fathers who've not told their sons and daughters what they did in the war, although for that matter, that was true in World War II as well. So if there's a lesson that should be taught, and it may fall upon the schools since so many others are silent, it should be the psychology of accepting what happened to this nation in Vietnam. Bernie?
What strikes you about the fact that Vietnam still has a lot of impact on people?
It has impact in two very different ways, Bernie. You know, I myself was a veteran out of the Army before the war started, so I don't have quite the same personal feeling. I think that there is a national impact, and that and that is part of the idea that the U.S. has to deal with. We lost a war, and how do we move beyond that? And the whole idea of restoring relations with Vietnam. And the second thing, and that's the tougher one, is the personal side. Those who actually served in Vietnam, those who lost people in Vietnam, they relate to it in a very different way. Those folks have different shoes to walk in than do many of us who experienced it somewhat from afar. Bernie?
Thank you, Charles Bierbauer, on this quite chilly night here in Washington. Both sides in the war said they were fighting for a unified nation. Well, Vietnam is one country now, but what's it like? CNN's Richard Blystone will look at a land trying to make peace with yesterday's divisions and today's diversity.
And on any given day, they were the enemy, but they're no longer the enemy.
Now the new page is open to us to the reconstruction of our country in peace.
But the seeds, I believe, of democracy were sown in the blood and the soil of Vietnam.
20 years. 20 years after unification, Vietnam's image remains fractured. Its deputy foreign minister says he wants the world to think of Vietnam as a country, not a war. Well, CNN's Richard Blystone covered the fight, and now he's gone back to find the nation.
Daybreak by the South China Sea. Evening rush hour in the highlands. A bright spot in a gray northern village. A night spot in booming Ho Chi Minh City. On the Mekong, or on the make, unification takes many forms here. The flag that wore down the Stars and Stripes flies all the long length and short breadth of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. Vietnamese from one region still have trouble making their words and ways understood in another. Countless rivers segment the country. Mountain ranges intimidate the traveler and punish the vehicles that challenge them. A trip between the southern and northern capitals, out of the question 20 years ago. Possible now, an hour and a half by air. By bus, 2 whole days, like this. The train is a few hours quicker, but the country's infrastructure is in dire shape. The U.S. endowed Vietnam with billions of dollars worth of equipment and facilities in the South. Too much to maintain. Gone too, most of the scars. 5 million forest acres were plowed down or sprayed with defoliant to expose hiding places. Here you can see the aftermath of the defoliant Agent Orange. It is leached into the water table, causes malformations, and will for years to come. But places GIs called hell, bases and battlefields, big and small, erased, safe. You find evidence of the war where the government wants it. Wreckage of a B-52 bomber lying where it fell in Hanoi. The non-capital, seat of the defunct U.S.-backed Republic of Vietnam, was quicker on the uptake, as always. Now officially Ho Chi Minh City. But try to make them quit calling it Saigon. Try to make them wear helmets in traffic. Try to make them give up decadent pastimes. Come back and glance at this raucous, raunchy, unruly city, and you can't help wondering if it was always going to be this way. No matter who won the war, whether there was a war or not. But until just a few years ago, freewheeling Saigon was in shock from communism and the collapse of familiar institutions. The relentless determination that won the war for the communists couldn't master the peace. If hard work alone could have rebuilt Vietnam, it would be long done. For those who grow it, rice is not a convenience food. The country's main staple was in decline. Now, after the government went soft on private enterprise, rice roots capitalism has started paying off. And the payoff is speeded up house building and nation building. Finally, the boom has hit Hanoi. This mammoth Korean-built complex of hotel, offices, and apartments will fit strangely with the rest of the city. Now it's the communist leaders in shock, facing forced re-education.
Chiến tranh sang một nền kinh tế hòa bình, phải nói rằng là
the switch from a war economy to a peace economy. We had to switch, we had to change from a centrally planned economy to a market economy. So at the first years of this process, we could not avoid blunders.
Overseas capitalists rotate through a refurbished Hanoi hotel, doing deals, complaining of red tape. Outside investment brings outside influence. And the market economy, a gap between rich and poor that the government has yet to find the answer to. Boom and bewilderment. Dollars the #1 currency, English the #1 foreign language. Big hopes pinned on reconciliation and aid from the old enemy, America. Boat people returning by force while thousands queue to leave Vietnam, and exiles come back voluntarily to check it out. Enough to make some nostalgic for the war when issues seemed so clear and people so pure. Dr. Zung Quynh Hoa says the communists have lost sight of the ideals of reconciliation and liberty.
We have made the revolution. Why? If we have made the revolution not for to replace an injustice by another injustice.
Very few dare talk so freely, but her credentials include 8 years in the jungle with the Viet Cong. Out there keeping quiet are anti-communists, families resentful that their dead have been dishonored. But people will tolerate much if they see things getting better. And peace of any kind can be habit-forming. More than half the Vietnamese have no memory of war. Soon the memory of hardline communism may pass as well. Ninth graders learn about the defeat of the imperialists and their puppets.
If we have won, is natural because of the unity, and we love our country.
The side that wins always gets to write the history. But the history isn't over. Richard Blystone, CNN, Vietnam.
The war. The war, in all its hellish proportions, ended years ago on the battlefield. It's the internal detonations and conflicts that have begged to be silenced. That healing of wounds goes on. We will visit memorials to those who fought and died again and again in hopes that all those affected by the Vietnam War will inch closer to peace. I'm Bernard Shaw for CNN at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial here in Washington.